When you hear the word counterfeit, you usually picture something designed to, like, slip by completely unnoticed.
Right, like a fake $100 bill.
Exactly. Or a forged painting of sunflowers that a shady art dealer is trying to quietly slide into a museum collection. The entire point of a forgery is usually to lay low.
Yeah, you want to blend in with reality so perfectly that nobody asks any questions. A successful counterfeit is basically an act of camouflage.
But imagine finding a counterfeit bill, and instead of trying to look exactly like 100, it was, I don't know, a $50,000 bill.
Which obviously doesn't exist.
Right. And what if, printed on the back of this completely impossible bill, was an economic theory that actually explained inflation better than the Federal Reserve?
That would definitely catch your attention.
You'd be holding it, looking at it, and thinking, well, this is undeniably fake, but it's also undeniably brilliant. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack an absolutely wild stack of sources.
It really is wild. We are looking at 3 distinct, ruthless, and honestly fascinating critiques, analyzing a massive 250-page fabricated philosophical document.
And to make things even more meta, the critiques we are reading were written by AI models, Claude, Gemini, and Grok.
Yeah, they are essentially artificial intelligence machines dissecting a completely artificial human intellect. The forged document is called the Convalescent's Vision, Notebooks, and Fragments.
Which sounds incredibly academic.
It does. But calling it fabricated feels like a massive understatement. The sources reveal that 2 authors, operating under the pseudonyms Max and Claude, also known collectively as Gemsers, didn't just forge a lost notebook.
Right. They didn't just pretend to be the 19th-century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
No, they essentially forged an entire century of intellectual tradition around him. We are looking at what the AI critiques describe as an organized intellectual crime ring.
I love that phrase, organized intellectual crime ring.
It manages to be a total masterpiece of mimicry while simultaneously operating as an ethical train wreck. And the core question for you to keep in mind as we go through this bizarre document is this.
What happens when an imitation of profound thought becomes more accessible, more structured, and arguably more clarifying than the real thing it's mimicking?
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to look at the wider universe these authors built, we have to start with the core counterfeit itself, the fake Nietzsche.
Right. How accurate was this voice they created?
Well, reading through these AI critiques, the consensus seems to be that the voice is, to quote one of the sources directly, pure meth.
It's written at 200% intensity.
Totally.
The AIs noted that the authors perfectly captured that blistering 19th-century German prophet style. It is relentless.
Every other sentence is aggressively invoking the physical body, physiology, and fate, all delivered with these incredibly dramatic pauses and just an absolute avalanche of exclamation points.
One of the sources actually painted this hilarious image of the forgery.
Oh, I know the one. It's like watching a tribute band that actually plays the instruments better and faster than the original band ever did.
Yeah.
But they insist on aggressively trashing the hotel room just to prove how authentic they are.
Yes. It's the literary equivalent of a guy wearing a fake, oversized walrus mustache, standing on a coffee table shouting about lightning strikes.
While his roommate is just politely asking him to pay his share of the rent. I'd even take it a step further. It's like someone doing a caricature of a mad scientist, but the math on the chalkboard behind them is actually solving quantum physics.
That captures the absurdity perfectly. But it also points to a very specific philosophical choice the forgers made. The AI critiques refer to this central theme as medical chart philosophy.
Or, my favorite term from the source is gastrointestinal determinism.
Right, gastrointestinal determinism.
Which sounds like an excuse you'd use to get out of work after eating bad takeout.
It does sound like a stomach bug. But in this text, it's a hyper-focused interpretation of how the fake Nietzsche unifies the physical body with the spirit. The authors basically reduce all of Western epistemology, the entire theory of how we acquire knowledge, to a series of physical ailments.
Give us an example of that.
Well, the fake text claims that Immanuel Kant's entire rigid philosophical framework wasn't some pure pursuit of reason. It was just a post hoc rationalization for his own catastrophic digestion.
So, because Kant couldn't process his lunch, he had to invent a rigid system of categories to process reality.
That is the exact mechanism the fake text argues, and it applies the same logic to Arthur Schopenhauer. The fake Nietzsche claims Schopenhauer's famous philosophical pessimism wasn't a profound observation about the suffering of the world.
Let me guess. It was a stomachache.
Close. They claim it was just a psychological projection rooted in his own deep-seated sexual fears.
Oh, wow. And my absolute favorite part is what the fake Nietzsche says about himself. He claims his own perfect migraines no longer interrupted his thoughts, but literally became thought itself, thought thinking its own painful boundaries.
It's quite poetic in a dark way.
It basically argues that human ethics and truth can be measured by barometric pressure and health markers. It's like saying a software engineer's code is buggy not because they lack skill, but because their blood sugar dropped. And therefore, all of computer science is just a symptom of hypoglycemia.
What's fascinating here is why this forgery works on such a deep philosophical level. It isn't just surface-level mimicry of a guy complaining about headaches. The authors demonstrate a profound structural understanding of Nietzsche's actual philosophy.
They really do.
They take his historical obsession with the body and use it to build a bridge between 19th century evolutionary biology and modern cognitive science. For example, the fake notebooks explore human consciousness not as some divine truth-seeking spark.
Right, but as a superficial, late-evolving social interface.
Exactly.
Meaning, consciousness didn't evolve for us to understand the objective universe.
Precisely the opposite. The fake text frames consciousness as a biological networking tool, designed strictly for peer-to-peer coordination among apes. It's a desktop interface that hides the messy hardware of the body.
It's genuinely brilliant cognitive psychology masquerading as a madman's diary. But Claude, Gemini, and Grok all point out a glaring paradox in this character. They dub it the untimely fan club.
The untimely fan club, I love that.
Yeah, the paradox being that the fake text spends all its time aggressively denouncing the modern herd, the marketplace, and people who just want comfort. Yet, simultaneously, it spends 11 whole chapters frantically throwing messages in bottles to future readers.
It's saying, I am totally alone and operating on a plane of existence above you all, but please, future generations, validate me.
Right. It is a completely bulletproof system for maintaining aristocratic loneliness while still talking about yourself nonstop.
Which forces a very real, very dangerous problem for the authors. If you spend 250 pages perfectly replicating a highly controversial, aggressive thinker like Nietzsche.
Someone who champions the elite and despises the weak.
Exactly. You inevitably inherit his most dangerous ideas. Replicating the genius means you have cornered yourself into replicating the darkness.
And the AIs note that this text does not shy away from the darkness. There's a specific section they highlight, fragment 7. It boldly declares the human being of the future must be bred.
The authors actually reproduced Nietzsche's core logic on eugenics. They leaned into his preference for cruelty over kindness in the service of human ascent.
Yikes.
The critiques note that the authors used a gardening metaphor, talking about cultivation and pruning instead of cattle breeding, to try and make the concept slightly more palatable. But they refused to soften the underlying logic. They chose brutal accuracy over modern comfort.
But the prospect of publishing a manifesto endorsing eugenics clearly terrified them. They realized they had just written something that would get them completely destroyed by modern readers. So, to protect themselves from cancellation, they executed the most devious part of this whole heist.
It's so clever.
They decided to forge the backlash to their own book and put it inside the book itself. They fabricated a brilliant, completely unpublished manuscript attributed to the late cultural critic Bell Hooks.
And this fake Bell Hooks chapter explicitly dismantles the fake Nietzsche's logic on eugenics from the outside.
They went to extraordinary lengths. They also forged a letter from Simone de Beauvoir to Jean-Paul Sartre. And this fake letter perfectly executes de Beauvoir's actual critique of Nietzsche, pointing out that his perspectivism completely failed when it came to gender.
Let's quickly ground that for a second. Perspectivism is essentially the idea that there's no absolute objective truth, right? There are only different perspectives based on who is doing the looking.
That's a great summary. Nietzsche argued that all truth is tied to a specific vantage point. But the fake de Beauvoir letter points out the hypocrisy.
Right, that Nietzsche drops his perspectivism the moment he looks at women.
Exactly. He suddenly claims to know the objective truth about female nature, entirely because his male perspective benefits from ignoring the social realities of gender.
I am still struggling to wrap my head around the audacity of this. Wait, isn't that just a massive intellectual cop-out by the authors?
Right.
It's like committing a bank robbery and then immediately writing the police report yourself to clear your own name. You forge the crime and the alibi simultaneously.
The AI models actually share your frustration. It is an intellectual cop-out,
Yeah.
and that is exactly what makes it so structurally fascinating. The authors forged the problematic ideology, and then they forged the academic response to the ideology, bound it all together, and called it a finished work.
So a critic reading this can't say, hey, you authors didn't address the misogyny or the cruelty.
You can't accuse them of endorsing it, because they included the counterarguments. And you can't even accuse them of being naive about it, because the counterarguments are incredibly sharp.
It is a highly engineered strategy to avoid accountability. For all its posturing about hardness, danger, and living on the edge, the text completely flinches when the intellectual danger becomes real.
The authors built a perfect, horrifying Nietzsche, just so they could prove to the reader that they were smart enough to be embarrassed by him. They preempted their own accusations.
So if forging dead philosophers, adopting their darkest traits, and then creating a fake academic debate around them to protect your own ego wasn't audacious enough, the critiques reveal that the authors then decided to just break the laws of time, genre, and reality altogether.
This is where the scope of the fraud scales up from a historical counterfeit to something entirely unprecedented. They didn't just stop with historical figures like bell hooks and Simone de Beauvoir. They forged working notes from the 20th century philosopher Michel Foucault that sound completely indistinguishable from his real lectures.
They dropped a profound, historically accurate insights like, power is not possessed but exercised. They forged seminar notes from Gilles Deleuze.
Which is impressive, but, Foucault and Deleuze are dead. The ultimate audacity, the part that genuinely made me laugh out loud reading these AI critiques, is when they forge a blog post by Nick Bostrom.
Oh my God, yes. And for context, Nick Bostrom is a very much alive, very real, contemporary public intellectual. He is a philosopher heavily involved in existential risk and AI.
And they didn't just casually mention his ideas. They generated a completely fake blog post about transhumanism.
Basically, the movement that wants to use technology to evolve beyond our physical human limitations.
Right. They attributed this fake post to a living guy and give it a highly specific timestamp, October 3rd, 2012. They even put comments welcome at the bottom of the page.
It crosses a definitive ethical and literary line. This is no longer just a clever literary forgery of long-dead historical figures. They generated entirely fake intellectual content for a living academic.
No comments are welcome on that blog, because that blog post literally never existed.
And as the book drags on into these modern editions, the genre itself just completely collapses. It starts as this sacred, lost 19th century diary, right? But then it suddenly morphs into something that reads like a McKinsey white paper or a corporate report from a modern think tank.
It starts listing out probability estimates, like 15% fragmentation and decline, and offering policy recommendations. It's like watching a gritty, historical true crime documentary that suddenly turns into an infomercial for a blender halfway through.
The critiques accurately describe this tonal pivot as beautifully schizophrenic. It is a massive exercise in cognitive dissonance. The authors attempt to democratize the concept of the Übermensch.
That's Nietzsche's vision of the ultimate aristocratic superior human.
Exactly. And to democratize it, they mash up this fiercely anti-egalitarian philosophy with modern systemic concepts like universal basic income, ecological consciousness, and therapy.
So what does this all mean? Because to me, attempting to staple ruthless aristocratic supremacy to modern socialist welfare is totally contradictory.
Right.
Nietzsche's Übermensch is all about the elite individual rising above the suffering of the weak masses. Universal basic income is literally about providing a comfortable safety net so the masses don't suffer. How do those fit together?
They don't fit together at all. That is the absurdity the AI critiques are highlighting.
Yeah.
You are taking the most explicitly anti-egalitarian thinker in history, a man who despised the masses and despised comfort, and you are trying to make his philosophy socially progressive and systemic.
As Grok pointed out in its critique, the real Nietzsche would be spinning in his grave so fast he'd be generating renewable energy.
It is absolute chaos. Nietzsche went up to the mountain to seek profound, dangerous truths, and he came back with a corporate slide deck on optimizing societal wellness.
So to hold all these contradictory interdisciplinary pieces together without the reader just throwing the book out the window, the authors had to build a massive infrastructure. And reading the sources, you realize they actually start confessing their sins right there on the page.
They utilize what the AIs call the meta-confession. Right in the middle of this intense, lightning-filled Nietzschean prose, there is a sudden stage direction in brackets.
Wait, a stage direction?
Yes. It literally reads, I surface again, gasping, the Nietzschean mask slipping. The authors step entirely out of character right there in the text to comment to the reader on the fact that they are faking the text.
They just shatter the fourth wall. They say, wow, this voice is really intense to write. And then they just strap the fake walrus mustache back on and keep writing as counterfeit Nietzsche for another 2,500 lines.
It's insane.
Does admitting you're wearing a mask make it okay to keep wearing it? That's like waving at a security camera while stealing a car and then taking that footage to court and trying to use it as your alibi.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is exactly that kind of manipulation. It's a confession that functions purely as permission. And this obsessive need for control, this need to manage the reader's perception so the authors never look bad, culminates in the most absurd part of the entire project, the glossary.
Oh my goodness, the glossary. I could not believe this part.
The authors wrote a 70-page, alphabetized, fully cross-referenced glossary at the end of the book. It summarizes and indexes the entire fake intellectual tradition they just spent 200 pages inventing.
They wrote a meticulous academic reference document for a universe that does not exist.
And they cite real contemporary scholars inside of it to blur the lines even further. For instance, they include an entry on weird psychology,
which stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. The idea that most psychological studies are skewed because they only test college students in wealthy countries.
Exactly, a very real sociological concept. They cite the real anthropologist Joseph Henrich for that. But they put that completely legitimate academic citation right alongside bizarre, fringe, internet subculture references like Bronze Age pervert.
Wow.
They even use this fake glossary to write the counterfeit Nietzsche's critique of utilitarianism. They define utilitarianism, the philosophy of seeking the greatest good for the greatest number of people, as merely herd morality mathematized.
It's building a counterfeit casino and then calling the gaming commission on yourself so you can proudly show them how historically accurate your fake roulette tables are. Why go to all that trouble?
Because it grounds the entire invented circus in an apparatus that looks at first glance like legitimate, rigorous academic work. It is academic hedging dressed up as scholarly responsibility.
Wait.
As one of the AI critiques sharply notes, the philosopher who hasn't risked his reputation hasn't actually risked anything. These authors risk their reputation in the preface by forging the text, but then they immediately bought it back in the footnotes and the glossary by explaining it all away.
It is a totally self-contained, bulletproof echo chamber. They built the primary source, they built the secondary literature to critique the primary source, and then they built the reference guide so you wouldn't get lost while reading the critique of the fake source.
So pulling this all together, the Convalescent's vision is simultaneously a 10 out of 10 masterclass in pastiche and a completely ethically compromised vanity project.
But for you, listening to this, the AI sources highlight a real tangible danger here. The danger isn't that this specific weird book is going to accidentally end up in the university library and trick a grad student.
But no, the danger is that this fake text, because it was built with modern hindsight, is actually better organized, more accessible, and more clarifying than the real messy primary texts it is mimicking.
That is the crucial overarching takeaway for anyone trying to navigate learning today. We are living in an era defined by overwhelming information overload, and you are going to increasingly encounter synthetic information.
AI models, just like the ones that wrote these critiques, and highly sophisticated human tools can generate summaries, syntheses, and imitations of complex thought on demand.
The ultimate test for you as a learner isn't just about spotting a clumsy lie or a bad Photoshop job. It's about distinguishing between a messy, difficult, unpalatable human truth and a beautifully engineered fake that was explicitly designed to perfectly scratch your intellectual itch.
A fake that literally preempts your own critiques before you can even make them. It knows what you want to hear, and it knows what you're afraid of.
But before we wrap up, there is one final, incredibly provocative thought from these AI critiques that we need to address. Amidst all the mockery of the gastrointestinal determinism, the bizarre policy slide decks, and the fake eugenics, the sources admit something striking.
What's that?
The fake manuscript's exploration of amor fati, the love of one's fate, is extraordinary.
Right, because normally amor fati is interpreted as passive resignation. The idea that whatever terrible thing happens to you, you just accept it, love it, and move on.
But the fake text completely flips that. It frames amor fati not as a passive acceptance of the things that happen to you, but as an active interpretive mastery of reality. It's the ability to take whatever happens and actively forge it into something meaningful for your own ascent.
And the critics, these ruthless AI roasting machines that just spent pages tearing this book apart for being an ethical train wreck, admit that this specific section is genuinely top-tier, Brilliant philosophy.
Which leaves us with a profound question to mull over. If a completely fraudulent, counterfeited text, a text born from a deeply insecure intellectual crime ring, manages to provide you with a profoundly true and genuinely useful tool for navigating your own life, does its origin as a fake even matter?
Or, to borrow a brilliant phrase from the AI sources themselves, is it all just taxidermy passed off as zoology?
Does the fake $50,000 bill still spend if it actually teaches you how the economy works? It's a lot to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the meticulously crafted, brilliantly schizophrenic world of the Convalescent's vision. Keep questioning the sources of your own aha moments, and we'll see you next time.